Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to our discussion on digital adoption in the world of multi-channel marketing. So during the next 45 minutes to an hour, we will be sharing with you some ideas and best practices that you can incorporate into your engagement strategies. If you have any questions during the discussion for our panelists, please type them into the chat box and we will be happy to answer as many of your questions as we have during the session today. So without further ado, let me introduce our amazing speakers. Today we have with us Trang Dao, who is the VP of Growth at Atom Finance, Philip Greenwald, who is the founder at Highwave and the Associate Director of Technology at Harvard Innovation Labs, and Christopher Smith, who is the co-founder at the American Graphics Institute. And my name is Irmina. I'm the Senior Product Marketing at MoEngage, and I will be the moderator for this discussion today. So thank you so much, Trang, Philip, and Chris, for taking the time to be here with us today. We're very happy to have you with us and very excited to hear your perspectives and stories. But before we start, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your companies and your roles, but also if you could include a fun fact about yourselves or a hobby that you picked during the last year. So why don't we start with Trang?
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. Thanks to MoEngage and the fellow panelists for participating in this event and hosting. So my name's Trang. I lead growth at Atom Finance. We are a consumer software platform that provides professional quality investment resources to individual investors. So we launched in 2019, so still relatively new as a solution for the growing population of investors entering the public market. So you want to think of us as addressing this like huge information gap between enterprise solutions and retail solutions such as Yahoo and Google Finance. I'd say a fun fact about myself is I am probably the world's biggest fan of the band The National and have planned vacations around their tours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Trang. And I'll pass it over to Chris.
Fantastic. I don't know if my fun facts are going to be able to keep up with Trang's there. So I'm not following any bands around. So in my role at American Graphics Institute, first off, AGI or American Graphics Institute helps organizations with their digital marketing tools and technology. So that means everything from creative and design tools and user experience design to web analytics and email marketing, both in terms of the strategic as well as the tactical implementation of those things. And in terms of my role, I spend most of my time in the areas that I love, which quite fortunately are digital analytics, and that also encompasses a variety of tools for reporting. So that could be, Data Studio, for example, the Search Console, things like that. And in terms of my fun facts, I'm the co-author of a dummies book, so Creative Cloud for Dummies, and I love to mountain bike. And I've been able to do a fair amount of that since I'm working from home and less time commuting. So that's it for me. So I guess we're on to Phil.
Hey, everyone. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Phil. I currently am working on Highwave, which you can think of as we make these stickers, which you can think of as like digital business cards. Essentially, you put them on your phone. Other people, they don't need an app or anything. They can simply touch their phone to yours, get your contact info, your Instagram, your LinkedIn. We also make it easier to keep in touch. But whatever information you want to give, you can put onto that. And actually right now, if you're listening to this special, you can go to our site and get one for free. No shipping, nothing like that. So you're already getting something from having attended this panel. Before that, I worked at Harvard Innovation Labs as their associate technology director, essentially advising Harvard startups on technology and some non-tech startups on startup strategy. And over the pandemic, I got really into baking soufflés. So I baked chocolate soufflés, raspberry soufflés, Grand Marnier soufflés. I baked branded soufflés. Me and a friend of mine tried putting logos on soufflés. So got really into soufflés this pandemic.
Thank you so much, Phil. So we have an amazing mix of music, technology, cuisine, and sports. I'm looking forward to our discussion. So let's start with the first question. According to Gallup research, a fully engaged customer's tangible benefits range from increased revenue to wallet share and product penetration. The fully engaged customers contribute 10% greater wallet share and average 1.14 additional product categories compared to actively disengaged, which is a lot. So all of these data shows us the importance of customer engagement and the impact that engaged customers have on our businesses. So let's begin with the obvious question: how can brands nowadays effectively engage customers across multiple channels, ensuring digital adoption? And what innovation in user experience and customer engagement can help with that? So maybe let's begin with Trang.
Sure. So I think when we think about user and customer experience, the key question we ask is, how do we create the best experiences for users while they're both within and outside of your product, right? So we break it down into those two buckets. So within our product, right? So Atom is, like I mentioned, a full package investment research product, right? Imagine like the biggest library of data and information of real-time streaming, historical financial news and data, coupled with the tools to quickly analyze and make decisions off that information. That only works well if obviously people who land within our product can use it easily, right? So our team spends a lot of time figuring out how to build the smoothest flow so that everything is literally at your fingertips and just a couple of really intuitive swipes, taps, clicks away. We have both an app and a web desktop product. So we built an experiment testing platform. We use analytics and attribution tools, like, mostly third-party tools, just to understand behavioral differences between our user segments, right? Segments such as those, renewing customers versus churn customers, users by their investment profile, right? So are they, using us to connect to their 401k accounts versus like an active trading account, right? Users by attribution source or who follow certain conversion pathways, right? We take all of that information, make sure that it is collated in a way that we can easily run A/B tests to test hypotheses, and then we just iterate until we find the best, first-time user onboarding experience, the best way to sort of plug holes and minimize drop-offs within search and like feature usage funnels. So that's what we do like within the product. Outside of the product, when I say outside the product, I'm talking about mostly like three categories. So your own channels like email and messaging, your app store presence, your website, your paid channels, marketing and PR, and then customer support, which I do view as outside. So it's sort of a similar approach. We manage all these categories just by making sure that our customer engagement platform, our attribution platforms, our ad management platforms, all of our internal databases are connected so that we always have one single view of like each user in every single way that we've touched them or that they've interacted with us across like all the different channels.
That is great. And Philip and Chris, is there anything you would like to add about digital adoption and how you're driving innovation and the user experience?
Yeah, definitely. So I think Trang made a great point that I want to talk about a little bit, which was when we say engage somebody, you can engage people before they're on your product, before they've heard of your product, when they're just about to purchase your product but haven't made that decision, and then engage them once they're also a user. And these are all very different things. My strongest opinions come down to how difficult often registration processes are, how easy it is, how difficult or how many mistakes people make in converting people. And that's because a lot of the standards are fundamentally flawed. So people here, for example, you need to get a ton of data. And so they ask for a ton of data upon registration. And there's some statistic, I don't know it off the top of my head, but if you want somebody to register for a site, every single field that you ask them to do has can't remember this. I want to say it's like a 20% drop-off rate for each field you add, and that compounds. So the more fields you add, the more it does. But on one of the first sites I worked on, we asked for email, first name, last name, and password. and we weren't getting registrations, and our registrations went up 180% by just removing first name and last name. So simple user experience, things like that, making it easier for people to engage with you is very important. Additionally, I think there's a rush to do multi-channel, and I think you need to own a channel first. I think, so I can only speak to the startup end of these things. I'm sure somebody else in here can talk more about how enterprises would deal with this. But as a startup with limited resources, I mean, just making sure that, so Trang was 100% right. Like you need to have one database that, sort of spans across the channels. That's so hard as a startup. Just thinking I want a Squarespace landing page, but a mobile app. And if I want to do Android and iOS mobile app, I can either choose to do, have different developers for both, or I can do one platform. I can do some cross-platform development. Off the top, you're talking so many different ways that a user can interact with you that it's really insanely difficult. So I'm a big fan of owning one channel first. We haven't even gotten to marketing yet. We've just been speaking about, or I should say, like social network marketing or digital marketing. I've just been speaking about sort of on-page user experience, but there's so many flaws with the open sources we use. One more thing I'll just say, because I know I've been talking for a while already, is a lot of the standards that we use have fundamentally flawed UX. So WordPress, for example, out of the box, is essentially, I don't even know how old WordPress is anymore, somewhere from 10 to 20 years old. It's more than 10, definitely. And so WordPress still includes a search bar in its default thing. And it's actually, I don't know about you, I never use search on a website because I know it's not going to work. And things like that tell me this is a WordPress site or this is a template site, and little things like that stop people from converting. So just making sure when you're using, the standards and the things that you are supposed to use, because I would still say WordPress is one of the best options, make sure that you think through user experience.
Yeah, I think, Phil, as you're talking about thinking through user experience, you're spot on that, it's important. And as Trang was mentioning, you need to understand what the users are doing within your app or your site. So you don't want to be using just a gut reaction to anything that you're putting out there. You should be gathering data, doing that A/B testing or some sort of multivariate testing to make sure that you're putting forward the best experience. And similar to something I think you were emphasizing there, Phil, I might be able to distill this down a little bit in that you want to make sure you're delivering what your organization is best at. As you're saying, focus on the user experience. You want to focus on the user experience for what the customer is coming to your website for. You don't want to try and be everything to the customer. So you need to almost use that Swiss design approach where you're minimalizing what it is that you've got available on your site and your app so that the customers can get to their end goal. And that requires not only some of data interpretation that you're indicating you're doing, Trang, but also some user research, some usability testing. So you may need to actually have some discussions straight away with your, one-on-one with your customers to get that information. But very good points from both of you, Phil and Trang. I will point out one really interesting anecdote, Phil, because I normally agree with you regarding search. However, I've got a couple e-commerce clients I work with that actually on their large multi-billion-dollar e-commerce sites, they need search, and customers that go to search tend to convert at a higher rate than those that don't. So it's, again, a matter of testing. And in some cases, you're spot on. In other cases, you might find that the data kind of points you in a different direction. So it's
I actually agree completely with what you said. I think the key word there was multi-billion-dollar clients. That's not the out of the press word box thing. So they can optimize search so it actually works. Precisely. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Also, one more point to make just about that search box is, I agree. Like some experiences are not great, and some experiences like work really well. But sometimes the search box is useful to the to us, to the company, because it actually is a little piece of information that the user is giving us about what they're looking for. And so that, and it's like what people are actually entering into that search box should definitely be something that you're tracking and tagging that user with, because it's actually like this free data that they're giving you about like what they actually came to look for on your product page, which you can then use to either continue to message to them or market to them, or build the types of things that they're looking for. So a little bit of a ulterior motive that you could think about like that search box for.
Yeah, and
I think that's.
Go ahead, Phil. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the main distinction between all of our comments is, so I come at this from startups. So I haven't worked with clients on the scale that you're doing. I advise startups, and maybe some of them have raised 10 million, 20 million. Actually, one of them just raised 60 million, one of my old Harvard ones. But there's still startups that are trying to figure out how to allocate resources. And what we tend to find in startup world is we have all these things that we should be doing, but then we don't act. So for example, I think every startup should be using the results of the search to figure out what their clients want. Just getting somebody to actually look at that and pay attention to the search results. It's not just short of hiring somebody whose distinct responsibility is that. It's hard to get sort of passive things when there's so many, and that, sort of speaks to why we do panels on this thing of multi-channel marketing. It's actually, there's a lot of different things. And for each different channel, there's so many things to think about. And so I would say every startup should always be looking at every piece of data they have. In practice, that's really hard. And it's going to be the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your sort of data inputs are going to give you, 20% of where your data comes from is going to give you 80% of what you can use and where you have to spend your time. But yeah, I agree as far as enterprise and everything is concerned. So it's really interesting seeing the distinctions that we're all making, because I think we agree on the fundamentals of making things easy. And we're just talking about companies with different sizes. It's really fascinating.
Yep. And to your point, and the challenge of being able to find that data or have somebody make the time to log in, it doesn't matter whether you're using a free version of Google Analytics or a 6-figure implementation of Adobe Analytics or a marketing engine, if you're using MoEngage and grabbing their analytics data, you've got to make the time to log in and see that data. But using some of the automated reporting tools that are available across these platforms and getting those things sent to you in sort of emails, or making it easy to digest and exporting the data out to something like Data Studio so that you're able to quickly access that data. And otherwise, right to your point, Phil, it gets ignored. And that's a real shame, because that data is available and you can make some really useful decisions with it, kind of the ones that Trang was indicating that she's been able to make within her business.
Thank you so much. Very valid points. And I also feel that we can't have a discussion nowadays about customers or data without looking at the global situation and how the behavior of our customers and brands interacting with the customers have changed. So what we have seen, one of the trends that has been emerging in this post-pandemic world is the increasing focus on keeping the customer at the center of our product and brand strategy. And this has worked well for many organizations across different verticals and geographies. So I want to ask, what strategies have you seen work well, or that your company has explored to put customers first in your digital adoption? And sure.
You want to start, Trang?
Start with Trang, yeah.
I can start, or you can start, Chris. I started last time.
Okay, well, let's see. So first thing I would think about whenever I think of customer engagement, I always think immediately of Zappos. And, it's just it's the textbook business school example of a great customer first strategy. But let me navigate away from them for a moment and think about another type of trend that's happening in the pandemic here, where adoption agencies are not able to find pets to share. The shelters are all out, at least within the United States, of cats and dogs and hamsters as people have decided to adopt them. So along that line of thinking, I'll talk a little bit about Chewy, which is one of my other favorite examples in this arena. And especially here in North America, Chewy has done some really great things, and they've expanded on them, not only with information that's accessible to customers about their specific types of pets, but instead of customer profiles, which was your original question, Arena, they've really modified that a bit to make it so that they're looking at pet profiles. So Phil, if you decide you're going to go on and buy something for your pet Chihuahua, you would not be setting up the profile for yourself. You're going to be setting it up for let's call it your dog Bowser. So, and you will set up with a picture of Bowser. You'll set up maybe birth date or adoption date. You will set up information about the kinds of food it likes, activities, and they're using their engagement to actually reach out to their customers on these important anniversary dates. And if you happen to stop scheduled delivery for a while because maybe the dog is going in for some sort of surgery or a medical procedure, you're going to get a note from them that's going to be personalized, that's going to just express concern about, oh, we hope everything is okay with Bowser the dog. So that level of personalization is important. That customer profile is important. And here we see a business that's using this in a really creative and innovative way. So in terms of success stories and being able to really one up that level of personalization, I think that Chewy is a fantastic example. And I'm in the Boston area, so I like to give a shout out to them because they've got a big tech office here as well. So that would be my take on this.
That's a really good example because I actually was someone who became a pet owner, first-time pet owner during the pandemic. And, because I work in marketing, like Chewy is always the one case study that everybody knows about, that everyone speaks about. And then I actually became a Chewy customer for the first time after 3 years of having heard about like Chewy's best practices. And I have to admit, like, it works really, really, really well. Like, I didn't even bother to look to any other company at all for my pet supplies or anything like that. I just went straight to Chewy. And they took care of everything, and everything that you described, Chris, was exactly how it is. And I feel like they really care for my pet.
Yeah, it's amazing how they create that one-on-one relationship with you, despite being a totally digital
I think
e-commerce brand.
when you not just pandemic did.
I think we're having some connections with issues with Zoom. So maybe Philip, you could answer this one, and then when Trang's connection is back, we can take it from there.
Sorry about that.
I think Trang's connection's back. Trang, can you hear us?
Yeah. When did I drop off? When was the last thing I said?
It was after Chewy. We were just talking about things that are changing during the pandemic, and I think using Zoom meetings for all the conferences is it's one of the elements.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think I was just trying to make the point that during the pandemic, everyone was in this more anxious and uncertain state of mind. And so I think as an advertiser, it definitely forced you to really be aware of your user's state of mind, right? So like during a pandemic, like when there's all this uncertainty, like the questions that we asked ourselves is like, what can we do to support our customer during uncertain times, knowing that customer loyalty in the future is deeply affected by how a brand behaves during a crisis, right? So, throughout the last year or so, we really made all of our decisions around that, right? Like we made sure that we tested our messaging and our advertising and everything, all of our customer engagement tools, just to make sure that like our mission of being like a reliable, trusted source of data information was very apparent. We knew that a lot more people were staying at home and that, they were online a lot more. And, paying much more attention than they normally would. So we were actually a little less shy about frequency capping our messaging, and like not as stringent as we typically would be, and being worried that we would overload our customers with our communication. With respect to the product, we actually like fast tracked a bunch of features and ungated a lot of things that we knew would help users, because the markets were so volatile, and like the information was changing so quickly. So we even like updated our product roadmap. But all of that was really centered around the fact that like, hey, this global event is happening. Like everyone pretty much is feeling the same. How should we react to that?
Thank you
Seems
so
like
much.
you made some really wide choices there within the organization, Trang. So that's really useful information. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
And I also love the element of looking at the frequency capping and the number of touch points with the brand that is optimal. So let's keep this one for later. And I would like to ask Phil how his experience has been during the pandemic.
So are we still on the question of keeping your customer at the center of your thinking during the pandemic? I just want to make sure I got the right question, right?
Yes, that's the one.
So I've been thinking about this example while everyone was talking, and I'm having trouble articulating it. But what I've noticed, I think maintaining authenticity, specifically with consumer brands, is very important. And I feel a lot of the companies throughout, so I'll talk about more negative, or what I think are some bad examples, since we had some positive examples already. I think a lot of companies through the pandemic used the pandemic as an excuse for bad service that really had nothing to do with the pandemic. I don't know if anyone's spoken with a customer service operator recently, but things that have absolutely nothing to do with the pandemic. I spoke with so I have these postcards printed that I ordered matte, and they came glossy. And when I spoke to them about that, they said, "I'm so sorry, that with the pandemic and everything, and a matte versus glossy mistake has nothing to do with the pandemic." So that's one thing I'd say, is be authentic. Another thing is I feel like a lot of companies are going with, how can I put this without annoying people? Don't listen to Twitter, listen to your customers. I think a lot of companies have started listening to general empirical things as opposed to actually listening to their customers. So I'll take Starbucks as an example of this. I don't think and I think some people are going to completely disagree with me, because I know there's some Starbucks loyalists out there. And this is a consumer example, so I know it's a little bit different from what we were talking about before, although we brought up Chewy. Starbucks did something that in theory was absolutely nothing, that I have a feeling is going to lose them a lot of customers, especially in New York. And all that is they still offer the pink sweetener, Sweet and Low, but it's no longer on the app. And so I used to love Starbucks. I went in quite a bit. I haven't gone in 3 months now and you can tell me that it's unhealthy. Sure. You can tell me that it doesn't taste as good. That's my preference. I prefer the pink sweetener. The fact is, Starbucks made it actively difficult for me to now enjoy the product of theirs that I like. And yet they continue to offer it. They claim it's health reasons. And the truth is, I have no idea what the reason is. It seems kind of arbitrary and stupid to me. And when I spoke to somebody at Starbucks, now it was just somebody who was at the Starbucks there, they again blamed the pandemic, which to me makes absolutely no sense. And I'm sure that's not the official Starbucks answer as to why this is all going on. But I felt like Starbucks was is belittling. So I guess to sort of sum all this up, I would say stay authentic. I think the pandemic gave a lot of brands reasons to mess up and change things and claim it's the pandemic, when really they're trying to cut costs and do weird things. So don't do that.
Thank you so much. So I think it's a good introduction to our next question that covers the online and offline engagement with the brand, and how many touch points should you have in order to have a good multi-channel customer engagement strategy? So as we know that as customers, we are interacting with brands across multiple channels and touch points, and it's not a single touch model. So I wanted to ask, in your experience, how many brand touch points are required during the onboarding, activation, or the engagement stage? And do you have a defined model for optimum, number of touch points at your company? And maybe we could start with Chris.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll use kind of broadly a number of clients that we work with as examples in this, because we do work both in consumer goods, and then we work in B2B arenas, and the number of touch points really varies. Even in consumer goods with lower price transactions, we'll rarely see anything short of 2 or 3 touch points before somebody is going to then engage. When we start to get into anything that relates to if it's a B2C, but it happens to be in the finance sector, you're typically seeing 3 or more touch points for somebody before they're going to decide to engage. And that can be across apps, it can be across in-app advertising, it's going to be retargeting advertising. Could be that on that first visit, they gave you email permission and they opted in, and you're going to need to reach out to them a second time or a third time before they're going to come back and engage. It does vary, but I think the key takeaway from this is that you cannot expect that you are going to be doing a pay-per-click ad or a display ad or an in-app ad, and that's going to be it. You really do need to make sure that you're having that continual level of engagement with folks, especially at the top to the middle of the funnel, to nurture them along so that they are going to, whether it's going to be, in our case, register for a course or a workshop or hire us, or for one of our clients, it's going to be signing up for a 529 plan for their child's education, or buying an automobile, or a bag of dog food. All of these require multiple touch points before you're going to be having that engagement with that customer of yours.
Thank you, Chris. Maybe we could hear what Tran has to say here.
Yeah, I don't really have too much more to add to what Chris is saying, because it definitely is an ongoing process, right? Like, this is something that we are still optimizing for, and even my previous roles, it's never like a finished process, right? The only thing I can definitely confirm is, yes, like the single touch is very, very rare today. I think as best practice, we just make sure that we have just what I mentioned, but I think what everyone's been talking about, which is just make sure you have all the MarTech tools and the infrastructure in place so that you'll be able to actually see, test, and optimize touch point and user experiences at different life cycle stages. Make sure that you're defining these stages, make sure that you have the levers in place so that you can react quickly to the data. I think an additional thing is we do monitor everything at the campaign and the channel level, just to determine when we have sufficient volume in case we do want to add like a layer of incrementality or holdout testing to, again, figure out like the optimal number of touch points. But it really is, it's very much like an ongoing process. Like, I think I would love to be able to walk into like a new role and be told like, hey, like we've completely figured out for this, like you should have, exactly 5 messages that are sent, like 2 through email, like 1 through text and whatever. But like, it's never the case. And even if it is the case, it changed, like something will change, like a new channel will be introduced, or like, some worldwide event happens that completely changes the way that people are interacting with your brand.
Yeah, I think Trang makes a great point, especially in bringing up the customer lifecycle. So I recommend everyone, I believe HubSpot has a free video series on the customer lifecycle, and that's very important to this point as far as how many times do you need to get on a potential customer's radar before they convert. But what's really interesting is it depends on when your ads hit the customer. So in theory, you want some sort of touch point for wherever your customer is in the life cycle. A customer might, so I don't quote me on this, but I believe that the stages of a customer life cycle are as follows. There's stage one where the customer says, I have this problem and I don't even know the solutions. So they Google what to do, too many Excel spreadsheets. They don't know what the solution is. They're not Googling something. And so in theory, you want an ad that gets them there, even though there's almost no way they're going to buy when they're just looking for, they're just trying to research the problem. You still want to be on their radar. Then they get a little bit further. They know that the answer to a bunch of spreadsheets is, let's for now say the eventual answer is a CRM. I think it depends on what your spreadsheets are storing, but for now we'll say it's a CRM. So now they know that they're Googling CRM and comparing between CRMs. Well, at this point, you'd want another touch point in theory, saying that we're the best CRM. And then finally, they know what they're going to do. They're just sort of lagging behind because, they aren't doing it. And at that point, you just want to remind them you're there and stay top of mind. So in theory, you want to have some message for them wherever they are in the customer lifecycle journey, because if you just get them right when they're about to purchase, chances are somebody else might have done that upfront work. And so they just have more recognition with that person. And even though that person, that potential customer, hasn't worked with the company, there's this perceived sense of trust because they've seen that ad over and over again. So I do think a lot of it comes down to getting them at the right time. So that's important. And then there's the medium. I believe YouTube is significantly easier to convert than Facebook ads. I believe. I could be 100% wrong on that, by the way. But I do believe YouTube ads convert better. And then there's also bang for your buck. So, you might just have a budget. You might not be able to get everyone at every single stage of the customer life cycle. But in theory, like when you're getting a customer and what channels you use matter.
Thank you so much. Which brings us to the next point, the customer engagement strategies. And we can all relate to this one when we get communications from brands that are not relevant to us and how annoying it is. And the research indicates that more than 50% of engaged customers get communications that are not related to the product or service that they own. I can give you an example. I still get notifications from New York gym that I left a long time ago to get special offers and upgrades. So you can see that even big brands haven't figured this out. And personalization is so important. So could you share some examples of innovative strategies that ensure this consistent, personalized, and targeted communications across multiple channels that build also trust and the loyalty with the brands? So maybe we could start with Trang.
Sure. So I think I've seen a few surveys that state that 2/3 of customers expect personalization to be a standard practice, right? I think a lot of brands, or a lot of companies assume that customers just don't want to give you any data, and obviously there's a big change in the landscape now with increased privacy and things like that, and so I think it's led a lot of advertisers and marketers to think like, oh, like nobody's ever going to give us any information anymore. But I'd say be careful not to jump to that assumption, right? Because like I say, like customers will be willing to give you information about their preferences and interest under the right circumstances, right? So I'd say when you think about it that way, then really a lot of your work should be focused on making sure that you're finding the optimal times to ask users what they want, and making it really easy for them to communicate their preferences to you, right? So we do focus a lot of our work on making sure that we are collecting user preferences, right? So again, going back to our MarTech stack, like we we use our MarTech stack to grab like the indirect customer data of like how a user came to find us, what they're looking for, going back to sort of like maybe like thinking about what they put into the search box on your site or something like that. Or thinking about like if they came through you through paid search or through YouTube or through Facebook or whatever, like how were they targeted? Like that tells you like what their interests are. We do make sure, like for just like direct methods of data acquisition, like we do make sure that our customer support team works really closely with our product and growth team so that we can relay what our customers are actually writing into us. Because we know that someone who actually took the time to share feedback with us, whether or not it's positive or negative, is a motivated user. And, that's very, very valuable information. So we do treat every piece of indirect and direct customer interaction as crucial intelligence, and we just make sure to integrate that and have that data flow into, again, like our owned campaigns, our paid campaigns, our website, our product, all that sort of thing.
Thank you so much, Trang. How about you, Chris? What strategies have you seen across different sectors and organizations that you have been working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm happy to answer that. And Trang brings up a very good point where honoring your customers' communication preferences across channel, timing, frequency, the different data points that you're able to collect from them. It's really key that we're looking at messages that are appropriately timed, that are using the channel that the customer has indicated they have a preference. And that could be a preference they've articulated to you, or it could be through the medium or channel that they've used to come into your site. So that could be that they came in through Instagram. You know that that's something that's appropriate. You're B2C, so you're able to maybe reach them through that channel. But I think it's also important that we think that, okay, if you're a B2B service, we should not necessarily be showing up on somebody's Instagram feed on Friday night when they're sitting at home. We need to make sure that we're using our own channel knowledge appropriately and that it aligns with the values of our organization and the services or products that we're trying to provide. So we don't want to be overstepping our bounds so that we migrate from keeping at the top of mind, as Phil was referencing, to becoming creepy and invasive. So that's a fine line that you want to make sure that you're not crossing. So we do that through targeting. We do that through geographic targeting. You bring up a very good point there. Through affinity groups, we can see what users are interested in and make sure that we're reaching them and a like-minded audience in a way that's successful for that engagement. So it's real important that we monitor this, the data that we have about the visitors, and reach them through the correct channels.
Thank you so much, Chris. And as a follow-up question, how important do you think are the rewards, exclusive memberships, and loyalty programs, and for the engagement of our customers? And have you seen any loyalty programs work well in terms of building the overall customer lifetime value? And maybe we can start with Philip.
Yeah, I think what's most important is incentivizing beneficial use of the product. So when a customer is new, having the right incentives in place. I know a lot of new customers end up getting some product, not using it, and then they stop. They don't make the next payment. They cancel their service, and that often comes down to not that the product wasn't even a good fit, but that it required behavior change. And so whenever behavior change is required, you need to make it such that the incentives will dictate that behavior change. I think you can do that through rewards, through loyalty, through, the buzzword is gamification. I think there's a ton of ways you can do it, but at the end of the day, it comes down to incentivizing the customer to make beneficial use of your app. I know that startups so what's also important to know is that all of us in the enterprise world, in the startup world, we're in a giant echo chamber of everyone in the world wants privacy. And in actuality, that's really just not what the data suggests. I think it's the responsibility of all companies to respect customers' privacy just because. But if we actually look at once somebody signs up for your service, as long as you have good due diligence, sorry, not privacy, like leave them alone, that you're not going to give them push notifications all the time and things like that. I see more startups say, we don't want to be annoying after somebody started with their company already, and say, so we're not going to put in push notifications that often. But what you're doing is not incentivizing use. You need to consistently remind your customers about this. Otherwise, they're just going to not use your app and think that it was useless, as opposed to not realizing that some behavior change might have been required. So I'm a big fan of incentivizing your customer, however you choose to do that. It's a different situation before they've become your customer. So as far as that goes, yeah, you don't want to be that annoying. You have to respect them. But once they've chosen to become your customer, you need to incentivize them however you can for their benefit, right? That they didn't waste their money to use your product.
Thank you so much, Phil. Trung, what has been your experience with the loyalty programs and rewards?
Yeah, I think I'll just maybe keep my answer short, because I feel like no matter what, it just sort of boils down to one thing, which is your most valuable users should know that you value them. So, that can be articulated or communicated in many different ways, depending on what type of product that you have and what your goals are and what you're trying to do, right? So like if you are just, a really young company, you're just trying to get as many users on as possible, then, a referral program makes the most sense. Something that you would open up to like your most loyal users or something like that, right? If what you're trying to do is actually like drive a ton of revenue and, maybe like boost your profit margins or something like that, then, maybe the first thing that you should do is actually just think about building out like a loyalty program that like rewards the folks who are either already spending a lot with you or very, very likely to spend a lot with you or something like that. So, I'd say, again, just to start with a guiding principle that like, you should define who your most valuable users are, and then you should figure out a way to make them understand that you value them a lot. And then after that, then you can decide like how you can extract more value for them in the way that you need for, to achieve the goals that you need for your business.
Thank you so much, Trank. Anything you would like to add, Chris?
Yeah, Trank has a really good point there that, the client should always know that they are going to be appreciated, and generally they're going to want to be recognized. And that can be as simple as, badges or certificates or notification of their 1-year anniversary with you, some of that gamification that Phil was mentioning. And kind of to highlight some of what Phil was mentioning there, you can incentivize at different levels of engagement. So you can incentivize them during that onboarding process, potentially with more frequency or different types of rewards to make sure that they have a successful onboarding experience. And then later on, during a different stage in that life cycle, you could be giving them other levels of incentives. And that could be if you're providing, free shipping, or it could be that you're providing them with some additional benefit or some additional service that your organization provides. And it could be an advanced badge that aligns to their profile. So there's different ways to look at all of this, but I think that we're all on the same page here that yes, that recognition is important, it's useful, and we need to make sure that we're doing it appropriately to meet the business objectives.
Thank you so much. And I see we have time for one final question. And so as we've already covered, marketing has become more multi-channel and multi-touch. And there is a lot of retargeting to make sure that we have a consistent and seamless user experience across different touch points. So we can't end a session on customer engagement strategies without talking about the retargeting strategy and how do you utilize data to find out and segment users that you can retarget. So what type of retargeting strategies works best? And if you could give us any use cases or any examples or insights, that would be very helpful. Maybe we could start with Tran.
Sure. So, yeah, retargeting is a bit of a very like a trigger word for me, I guess. I mean, there's a time maybe 5 to 8 years ago, I think, in the programmatic world when every advertiser was running display retargeting. I think we remember that. That was the time when no matter where you were on the internet, you would just be bombarded with an ad showing you like the products that you had just looked at, you know, on another website or something like that, right? And so there was a bit of an explosion, a bubble in that period, and everyone on the advertising space was learning some very hard lessons about like the real added value of a retargeting ad. And so, you know, like the world of retargeting, I think, at least for me, was a really good training ground for just figuring out the best way to, you know, when and how often you should be getting in front of users, because you're forced to determine if these users would have come to you anyway, even if they hadn't seen your ad, like hadn't seen your email, hadn't seen, you know, whatever channel that you were using, right? Because retargeting very much is a last touch. Is skewed towards like a last touch like credit methodology, and it's very easy to sort of fall into this trap of like, oh, like retargeting is taking all the credit for like all of my advertising, and I should like only run retargeting. So anyway, you know, in general, I'd say like if, you know, no matter what channel you're running your retargeting in, make sure you're running like segmented incrementality holdout tests, right? For every dimension of like how you want to run your retargeting, right? That means running the holdout test to figure out how many times you should be hitting a person, how soon after they've done whatever they've done on your product to find them again, right? Like how recently, all, you know, cadence, like all that sort of stuff, sequencing, like you know, it's very important to make sure that you are always measuring for you know, was that retargeting message actually effective, or, you know, did I already have them in my conversion path anyway, and they were planning to come back and do what I needed anyway.
Thank you so much, Trang. How about you, Chris? How has your experience been?
Yeah, so in thinking of retargeting, I think it's really important, as Trang was starting to touch on, to look at different attribution models and to understand that just because somebody has gone through a retargeting ad campaign with someone like, you know, whether it's a Google ad, a Criteo ad, something of that sort, and ended up on your site, doesn't mean that that is where you should be directing all of your marketing resources. Instead, you need to recognize that that was likely the last touch, but they quite likely were visiting with you through all of these different touch points that we've been discussing. They could have come to you originally because they saw something on a blog post, on a LinkedIn post. If it's B2B, it could be that they came in through Instagram or through a Facebook ad if it's a B2C client. Recognizing all of the different touch points and starting to place value on each of them is really important. So getting into that analytics data. So Phil, it's, as you say, you know, maybe only 20% of the folks are able to get in to look at all that data that's there, but those that can will realize that there's a wealth of information that shows you that each of these different touch points are important for you, not simply retargeting. Retargeting is critical, it's important, but it is not the end game. The other things that's useful to think about with retargeting is not all retargeting clients are the same, or prospective clients are the same. You do want to make sure that you are looking at different audience segments that are, you know, accessible to you, and you can build out effective cohorts that you might be wanting to reach out to. So that way you are not just hitting everybody that's come in to visit your website one time, you are maybe hitting those that come from a certain channel, or those that are on their second visit, or those that spend a certain amount of time. So analyzing that data can really help you refine that advertising investment. And that's not just an investment in the dollars that you're spending, it's an investment in the time that Trang or you are spending in trying to build out and devise those campaigns. So it's real important to look at that analytical data that's accessible to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. So I want to be mindful of our time. I see we have a few minutes left. I want to ask you any final thoughts. If you could give our audience one tip, if they could just do this one thing to improve their customer engagement strategy that should be their takeaway. And maybe we could start with Phil.
Yeah, sure. So I'll speak to the startup people in the room because, again, enterprise is not my area of expertise. Almost all startups have way too many barriers to conversion. So basically the point that we spoke about at the beginning, make it as easy as possible from the time they find out about you to learn about you and then sign up. That means on your landing page, you should essentially always have, your value proposition, that is what you do in a sentence, and a call to action, which you really shouldn't be more than an email if you can help it. It could also be, a credit card. It could be, the buy now button, but a value prop and call to action, front and center, and then every single other part of your site, of any one of your funnels, your calls to action should be consistent and go to the same place. But I think that's really it. It's a matter of don't get in your own way. And I really hate when people make you fill out a lot of information to get a guide, and the guide's not even your product. So, fill out all of this information to get this report, and then you do some report, and then that report, and then you get bombarded with emails, and you don't even have their product. One, I think from a startup perspective, it's a waste. You're actively advertising something that's not even your ultimate KPI. It's you've gotten people to come inbound, and yet you're marketing an inbound thing. So I don't like doing that. But general rule of thumb is just make it as easy as possible, as few fields to fill out as possible. Make it easy for somebody to give you their money.
Thank you so much. I see we are out of time, so I wanted to thank you so much, Trang, Chris, and Phil, for sharing your great ideas and experiences here. And I will pass it over to Brad for the next session. Thank you so much.